Hello and welcome, I'm James Ezimoha and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Iran claims 7 people have been killed and 16 wounded in another night of fire with the US. Political turmoil continues in Kyiv as Zelensky appoints his new acting defense minister. And Azerbaijan's foreign minister meets with his Russian counterpart in Moscow to discuss bilateral ties. The US has launched strikes on Iran for a 6th night in a row. Iran has retaliated by targeting US military facilities in the region. Washington says Iran violated the June memorandum by firing on commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. However, both sides still appear to be leaving a small diplomatic window open. Here's our report.
The US military has launched its latest wave of strikes on Iran for the 6th night in a row. US Central Command said the operation was carried out on the orders of President Donald Trump and involved fighter jets, aerial drones and warships. It said precision munitions hit dozens of Iranian military targets, including coastal surveillance and air defense sites, military logistics, infrastructure, and maritime capabilities. Iran has condemned the attacks, with its foreign ministry calling them a violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. The White House said the strikes followed what it said were Iran's violation of last month's Memorandum of Understanding. It accused Tehran of firing on commercial vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz.
The reason, and this is important for the American people to understand, the reason for the recent strikes over the course of the last several days is because Iran violated the Memorandum of Understanding that we struck with them. Specifically, in the Memorandum of Understanding that they signed, they were not to fire on commercial vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz. And unfortunately, they have made the tragic decision for them to do that. And President Trump is not going to sit by and allow these active acts of terrorism to take place in the Strait without ensuring Iran pays consequences for that, and that's what we are witnessing right now.
Iran has responded by targeting US bases and facilities in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said its naval and aerospace forces carried out joint missile and drone attacks on radar systems, communication centers, command facilities, and other military infrastructure. The renewed fire comes despite a US-Iranian Memorandum of Understanding signed in mid-June. Both sides were expected to end hostilities and begin negotiating towards a final agreement within 60 days. The White House says Iran is still communicating with Washington and wants to make a deal, but the latest escalation has put the fragile truce under mounting pressure.
Iran says at least 7 people were killed and 16 more were wounded in the latest wave of US strikes on the bridges and residential areas. Tehran's mission at UN headquarters in New York said the attacks against civilians and non-military infrastructure constitute war crimes. Ines correspondent Turaj Shivelulu has more.
Local media sources in Iran reported that the death toll has risen to 7, resulting from US attacks on residential areas and bridges in Bandar Abbas and Bandar Khamir in southern Iran late on Thursday. According to the state broadcaster IRIB and the semi-official Fars news agency, at least 16 non-military citizens were wounded, including 9 receiving medical treatment for serious injuries. Earlier on Thursday, the Ministry of Health said more than 300 people have been injured and 35 others killed in the US attacks since 24th of June. The southern provinces of Hormuzgan, Sistan and Baluchistan, and Khuzestan, bordering the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman, have suffered the heaviest impact from the latest attacks. Meanwhile, Iran's UN ambassador, Amir Saeed Iravani, has sent a letter to the Security Council and the UN Secretary General condemning the attacks on Iranian civilian infrastructure, calling them war crimes. In the letter, he said that targeting civilians is a serious violation of international humanitarian law, and the US should bear full responsibility. He also wrote that the continuation of illegal armed attacks poses a serious threat to international peace and security, freedom of navigation, regional stability, and the security of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, linking the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman. In Tehran, the Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the U.S. betrayed diplomatic efforts by breaching the Memorandum of Understanding signed in June, adding that the U.S. should be held responsible for breaching the agreement. The statement also called on neighboring countries in the sovereign Persian Gulf states to prevent the U.S. attacks from their soil and airspace, defending Iran's right to hit U.S. bases and interests in the region as an act of self-defense. Turashir Alilu from Tehran for A News.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has detailed previously unreported allegations of Chinese meddling in U.S. elections in a primetime speech from the White House. His administration earlier said the speech would provide what they call facts and evidence to show American elections are not as secure as previously thought. However, some Republicans fear the speech has weakened voter confidence and hurt the party's chances in November's midterm elections. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Some startling claims from the US president during this Thursday night primetime address. Here's a man who has long claimed that the 2020 election was stolen from him, that it was rigged. Tonight he said that he provided evidence and facts to show that it had been stolen and rigged. That evidence has now been published on the White House website. He says that China managed to infiltrate the 2020 election and the run-up to it, and were able to influence the outcome. He claimed that China managed to steal about 2/3 of the US population's sensitive data. About 220 million Americans were compromised. But he also said that there was a tremendous cover-up by the US intelligence community not to bring these claims to light. Well, why make these claims now, just 4 months before those midterm elections in November that Republicans are already incredibly worried about? Well, really, this was not about the midterm elections. It was about trying to push through a key bit of legislation through Congress, the Save America Voter ID Act, something that's been stalled for many, many weeks and something that Donald Trump wants to be able to push through and enact. This would mean that voters out there across America would have to provide proof of citizenship and provide a photo ID to be able to vote. But some Democrats say there are many Americans who don't have photo ID. They don't have a passport, they don't have driver's license, and therefore this could suppress the vote in the future, in particular for voters who lean Democrat. But Donald Trump wants to push this through, and he was trying to convince Republicans in his own party to be able to do that, saying to them that this election security demanded that they now pass this act. But this could also have been the possibility that Donald Trump was laying the groundwork of trying to gain more control over elections. At the moment, according to the US Constitution, elections are run state by state officials. Donald Trump may want to try and gain some federal control over those elections. That's unclear, but what is worrying Republicans is that tonight's speech may backfire on the party just before the midterm elections. They've been cautioning the president to focus on kitchen table issues, things that are worrying Americans, like the cost of living, inflation, gasoline prices for motorists. Instead, the president chose to look to the past, to the 2020 election, rather than looking to the future, the 2026 midterm election and the 2028 presidential election. Republicans are worried that that may now hurt their party's chances in the coming months. Nick Harper for A News in Washington.
Now, President Donald Trump has addressed the nation as tensions with Iran remain high, yet both sides continue to leave the door open to diplomacy. Joining us now is Teresa Fernandez, international relations expert, joining us from Lisbon, Portugal. Good to have you, Teresa.
Good morning, James. Good to be here.
Thank you. Now, President Trump struck a defiant tone in his address. Who was he really trying to persuade? Tehran, America's allies, or voters at home?
So after hearing Trump's speech more than one time, it's very straightforward, the strategy that the president is implementing. President Trump always starts with addressing his main achievements, namely with the lowering of the prices of medicine in the United States, with the establishment of investment accounts for children in the US, lowering prices, increasing jobs, always saying and claiming that America is doing better than ever now that Trump is back in the White House. So this speech did really start by opening the pathway for what the president was really aiming to get to, which was presenting China as the main party or the main actor to blame for the 2020 election results. As we were hearing in the previous part, almost 220 million people had their data stolen and used by the Chinese government. Well, I think this strategy will backlash in the American administration because we do need to remind ourselves who was president at the time. So if the national intelligence community of the US failed to control this crisis at the time, this will of course revert badly at the White House administration that was in power at the time, and that was the Trump administration 1.0. So besides that, I think Donald Trump is now trying very hard to make sure that this legislation that we were just hearing about, the Save America Act, is passed through the Senate because it does have the support of the House, and it does require Americans to present some sort of ID, some sort of identification, some legal identification, which is really used in elections throughout Europe. So liberal democracies do rest on the integrity of their relations. And if people can, in fact, go to the ballot and just say, I'm an American, I have the right to vote, this has a negative impact as well. So I think in this sense, Donald Trump is doing the right thing.
Yes, Teresa, I want to get your thoughts on other issues. Now, with tensions still high,
Sure.
How much of this confrontation is now being driven by domestic politics rather than foreign policy?
So when we look at international conflicts, we do need to analyze both because the border between domestic policy and foreign policy is quite permeable. So we shouldn't separate those things fully, analyze them, of course, but they mixed with each other. It's a dynamic interaction. We do know that the Americans will have the midterm elections in November. There is domestic pressure, of course, especially after this address, to make sure that these elections are in fact transparent. But also we need to understand Iran's strategy here. So with the focus on the Strait of Hormuz, this is pushing forward the addressing of the nuclear issue, which is the core of the American intervention in the Middle East. And it's, of course, putting more domestic pressure on Trump. So both policies, both level of policies are now putting more pressure at the White House.
All right. Now, so despite the threats from Trump, Tehran still continues to signal openness to diplomacy. Why maintain such a defined public position then?
So Iran sees the United States, of course, as the external invader. This is an actor that is across the world's second largest ocean. This antagonism between the United States and Iran has been going on for many, many years. We can go back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979. So this polarization between these two actors has been around for quite some time. And we need to remind ourselves that Iran, the Shia version of Muslim, they are based on this culture of martyrdom. So they promote the sacrifice to defend the well-being of the nation in the fight against the invader. So there are two actors that they do see as the invaders or as direct threats. One is Israel, which is not yet in this escalation of 6 days of attacks that we are seeing, but we'll get to that in a moment. But the strongest actor in terms of this defiance of sovereignty and authority and power projection within the Middle East for Iran really is the United States. Right. So this polarization will most likely increase with the next couple of days, and as attacks are intensifying, which we are seeing now on the footage as well, for energy infrastructure, civilian infrastructures. So it does not seem to be going towards the diplomatic negotiations as one would expect.
Now, so that leads me to the next question. So where's the tipping point when pressure stops creating leverage and starts closing the door to diplomacy then?
So I think that in this scenario, in this terrain that we are seeing, it will still be a while until that tipping point is really reached. I think the step before that tipping point is reached is if Israel does become under attack by Iran. So I think that's the last step before the tipping point. And by tipping point, we see a massive strike of attacks like we've seen in June last year, or in the beginning of this year as well. So a larger scale and a larger broad impact on the terrain. Israel being present geographically in the region and being a close ally to the United States, they feature both very strong intelligence communities and agencies. They feature very strong military power, especially the United States. If these two actors do come together in striking back Iran, it does show us that we are possibly in the last step before a very, very large intervention, military intervention in Iran that will cause many casualties, because Iran will retaliate to the countries of the Gulf. So I think that if we reach that stage soon, it's very concerning.
All right, so after weeks of escalation and recently public threats, who now holds the stronger negotiating hand? Is it Washington or Tehran, and why?
That's a very good question. It's the billion-dollar question at the time for us to analyze this conflict. I think that both actors have their pros and cons to be in this low friction dynamic with each other, which is a low friction that has potential eventual spikes throughout its evolvement. So, of course, Iran holds the geographic leverage for being placed geographically in the Strait of Hormuz. So, in that sense, Iran holds this vital artery for the world's economy. The United States, of course, features the world's military power, so has a very big capability of projecting its power in the region as well. But this comes at the cost of the taxpayers in the United States, but in the rest of the world as well. This, of course, also damages the Iranian economy, which in my analysis does not seem ready in the short term to be fragile enough to come to the negotiation table with the willingness to compromise. So both sides are implementing their own visions and interpretations of Clause 5 of the memorandum that is now being ripped apart in the terrain. And this is the biggest friction point at the moment. But both parties have their pros and cons, of course, of being involved in this conflict, and the impacts are felt throughout the world, but mainly between these two, namely with the loss of civilians in Iran. So this, of course, has a big weight for the international order of affairs that we are seeing, and the prices of oil are already spiking as well.
All right. That was Teresa Fernandez, international relations expert, joining us from Lisbon, Portugal. Thank you for your time, Teresa.
Thank you so much, James. Have a good day.
All right, we'll be back after a short break with the latest from Ukraine, where Zelensky continues to face a backlash over his latest cabinet shakeup. Stay with us. Welcome back to Air News. Now, Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister, Ceyhun Bayramov, is visiting Russia on Friday for bilateral talks with his counterpart in Moscow. The ministers to discuss bilateral ties as well as key regional and international issues. Moscow says the visit reflects its commitment to strengthening political dialogue and expanding cooperation with Baku, describing Azerbaijan as an important partner in the South Caucasus and the Caspian region. Bayramov last visited Moscow in December 2023. Now, Ukraine says its security services have struck two sanctioned Russian oil tankers in the Black Sea, targeting what Kyiv describes as Moscow's shadow fleet used to evade international sanctions. The operation comes as fighting continues across Ukraine. A Russian guided bomb strike on Zaporizhia killed at least 3 civilians, while missile attacks on Odessa left 2 people dead and 8 others injured. Azerbaijan's foreign ministry says the body of Samad Nasrullayev, captain of the merchant vessel Atlas Bay, has been recovered and brought to Odessa after the ship was hit in a drone attack near the Ukrainian coast. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has nominated Security Chief Yevhenly Khamara as acting defense minister despite public protests over the appointment. Zelensky says Khamara's experience, including overseeing long-range strikes on Russia, will help drive defense reforms. The nomination follows the dismissal of Defense Minister Mikhail Fedorov, who was credited with expanding Ukraine's drone program and advancing military reforms. Parliament must now approve Khamara before he can formally take up the post. Now, Turkey's foreign minister has called for a resumption of peace talks on his trip to Kyiv. Hakan Fidan told President Zelensky that Ankara is willing to host the next round of negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. Adam Moron reports from Istanbul.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev as Ankara continues its diplomatic efforts to revive stalled talks aimed at ending the Russia-Ukraine war. The closed-door meeting took place Thursday evening during Fidan's two-day visit to Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian president, the meeting tackled possible ways of reviving the stalled peace process between Kyiv and Moscow.
We are very thankful for your support of our territorial integrity, sovereignty, and we're thankful for your steps in negotiations. In the process, we had several meetings in Turkey, and we really want to have peace for our country.
Zelensky also conferred Ukraine's second-class Order of Merit on Fidan, citing the latter's outstanding personal contribution to strengthening bilateral ties between the two countries. The meeting came only hours after Fidan held talks with his Ukrainian counterpart, Andriy Sybiha, with whom he held a joint press conference in the Ukrainian capital. Speaking to reporters, Fidan urged a resumption of direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, reiterating Turkey's readiness to provide a venue for future talks. Turkey has previously hosted several rounds of talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations, while maintaining working relations with both Moscow and Kiev throughout the war. But soon after Fidan made the remarks, the Kremlin appeared to downplay prospects for an immediate return to the negotiating table. While the Kremlin spokesman thanked Turkey for its ongoing diplomatic efforts, he also said there was currently no prospect of a short-term resumption of peace talks. The contrasting statements highlight the challenges facing Ankara as it seeks to revive diplomacy between the warring parties. Nevertheless, Fidan's visit to Kiev underscores Turkey's continuing effort to position itself as a mediator, with Ankara arguing that direct dialogue remains the only way of finding a negotiated end to the ongoing conflict. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now, Germany and France are bringing their governments together for high-level consultations. Leaders set to discuss key economic, energy and security priorities. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron are meeting near Cologne as ministers from both countries begin formal consultations. Economic policy, energy, security and defense top the agenda, with the discussions aimed at advancing closer cooperation. The meeting follows talks between the two leaders in Paris earlier this week during France's National Day commemorations. A landslide has struck a section of road in China's southwestern city of Chongqing City. Authorities say nearby buildings were damaged and an unknown number of people are believed to be trapped. State media says 9 people have been rescued and taken to hospital, with nearby residents evacuated to safety. Search and rescue operations are still underway. China's Ministry of Emergency Management has sent 100 personnel to the disaster zone, alongside more than 205 fighters. Authorities have also sent relief items, including tents, folding beds, blankets and emergency kits to support rescue operations and displaced residents. Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has held talks in Pyongyang with Wang Hunin, China's 4th highest ranking official. Friday's visit is the latest in a series of high-level exchanges between the two countries. It follows Chinese President Xi Jinping's trip to North Korea in June. Kim and Wang pledged to implement agreements reached during Xi's visit, including expanding cooperation in politics, the economy and culture, while strengthening strategic communication. Now, artificial intelligence is moving beyond the digital world, with a major conference in Shanghai showcasing the latest generation of intelligent machines. Developers say they could transform workplaces and everyday life.
Robots are taking center stage at the World AI Conference in Shanghai, where machines are unboxing themselves, playing table tennis, operating cameras, and assembling components. Developers say advances in sensing and movement are bringing industrial robots closer to wider commercial use.
We have integrated force control and multimodal sensors, including vision systems, into these two robots. This allows us to guarantee an operational precision with an error margin of just 0.5 millimeters.
The exhibition also features consumer-focused designs, intended to make robots more adaptable to different settings.
This is our Qiwan T1, the world's first transformable personal robot. Yuanzai, transform. As you can see, it has now shifted into a dog-like form.
Other systems are designed for hazardous work, including a robot that can travel along live power lines and carry out pin repairs on their own. The conference brings together more than 1,100 companies in an exhibition area covering over 100,000 square meters. More than 140 forums at the conference are also examining AI innovation and global governance, as developers seek to expand the technology's role in industry, daily life, and high-risk work.
Now, China's semiconductor industry is seeing strong momentum. New official figures show chip production surged in the first half of the year, driven by demand for artificial intelligence. China produced nearly 280 billion integrated circuits in the first half of 2026, averaging more than 1.5 billion chips a day. Official data shows output rose over 23% from a year earlier, driven by strong demand for AI-related chips. High-tech and digital manufacturing also grew, while green industries expanded with output of nuclear power equipment, hydroturbine generators, and lithium-ion batteries also increasing. Now, the Trump administration is set to tighten visa rules for foreign students, exchange visitors, and journalists. The changes would introduce time limits for those visas. Under a new rule, visas that currently last for the duration of a program or employment would instead have fixed time periods. Student and exchange visas would be limited to 4 years, while journalist visas would last up to 240 days or 90 days for Chinese nationals. The rule is due to take effect 60 days after publication in the Federal Register, subject to congressional review. We'll be back after a short break with more on the countdown to the World Cup final in New Jersey. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, a television report in Germany says Azerbaijan is becoming increasingly important for Europe beyond energy supplies. It highlights growing cooperation in trade, transport, and regional connectivity.
Azerbaijan is strengthening its position as a strategic partner for Germany and Europe, according to a report broadcast by Berlin-based television channel TV Berlin. The programme highlights growing cooperation in trade, transport, digital infrastructure, and regional connectivity. It also notes that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's recent visit to Baku focused on expanding cooperation in those areas. Political ties have also strengthened in recent years. President Ilham Aliyev has visited Germany 5 times since 2023, while President Frank-Walter Steinmeier became the first German head of state to make an official visit to Azerbaijan last year. German experts featured in the programme say the Middle Corridor is becoming an increasingly important trade route linking Europe with Central Asia. They also point to Azerbaijan's role in the Southern Gas Corridor and its growing investment in renewable energy as supporting Europe's efforts to diversify energy supplies.
Above all, Azerbaijan's energy exports are important for Europe, and especially for Germany. Azerbaijan will therefore play an increasingly prominent role in its cooperation with Germany.
The programme concludes that cooperation now extends far beyond energy. It says progress towards peace with Armenia and the presence of more than 200 German companies in Azerbaijan are creating new opportunities for trade, investment and regional stability.
Join us now from Berlin is Azerbaijan's ambassador to Germany, Nassimi Aliyev. Ambassador, welcome to A News.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to join your program. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, we've just seen a TV report in Germany highlighting Azerbaijan's growing importance as a strategic partner for Germany and Europe. From your perspective, what has fundamentally changed in Germany-Azerbaijan relations over the past few years?
The report rightly highlighted that Germany and Azerbaijan have entered a new phase in their relationship. Our partnership today is broader, more strategic, and more dynamic than ever before. At the same time, it's important to remember that our ties are not new. They have deep historical roots dating back to more than 200 years when German Swabian settlers from Württemberg came to Azerbaijan and established flourishing communities such as Hellenendorf, Annenfeld, Traubenfeld, and so with these German names. And they lived peacefully together with their Azerbaijani neighbors for generations, creating a remarkable example of intercultural and interfaith coexistence. And this shared history remains an important part of the friendship between our two peoples and provides at the same time a strong foundation for relations between our two independent states. Yeah. And building on this historical legacy, we have witnessed a remarkable intensification of political dialogue in recent years. At the invitation of Federal Chancellor, President Ilham Aliyev has paid 2 visits to Berlin since 2023, holding substantive discussions with a German leadership. Also since 2023, President Aliyev has participated at the invitation of the Munich Security Conference at this important global conference 3 times. And Federal Chancellor Merz has invited President Aliyev to an official visit to Germany this year. Germany's foreign minister visited Azerbaijan twice during this period, while the German vice chancellor traveled to Baku as well. Also, as the report said, last year President Frank-Walter Steinmeier became the first German president to visit Azerbaijan. These high-level exchanges clearly demonstrate the importance both governments attach to strengthening our partnership. Today, Germany increasingly sees Azerbaijan not only as a reliable energy partner, but also as an important partner for connectivity between Europe and Asia, economic cooperation, and regional stability. Likewise, Azerbaijan values Germany as Europe's largest economy, a global technological leader, and one of our most important partners in the European Union. Our dialogue today covers a broad agenda from energy security and trade to transport, green energy, digitalization, education, and regional peace and stability. We may not always share identical views on every issue, but our discussions are open, constructive, pragmatic, and based on mutual respect. That, in my view, is the hallmark of a mature and forward-looking partnership.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, Azerbaijan is increasingly seen as a gateway between Europe the Caspian region and Central Asia through the Middle Corridor. Why is this route becoming so important, and what role can Germany play in its further development?
Exactly. The Middle Corridor has now become strategically important because Europe is seeking more diversified, secure, and resilient transport routes connecting European and Asian markets. And Azerbaijan occupies a unique geographical position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. It's a no-brainer that without Azerbaijan, there is no Middle Corridor. Just a look at the map is enough to understand it. Through our railways, highways, ports, and logistics infrastructure, we connect Central Asia and the Caspian region with Turkey and the European markets. Azerbaijan started working on this crucial corridor even before the term Middle Corridor was invented. We have made substantial multi-billion-dollar investments in modern infrastructure, including the Baku International Sea Trade Port, railway networks, highways, and digital customs systems. And these investments have significantly increased the efficiency and capacity of the corridor. The Middle Corridor is not intended to provide Europe, is actually the whole idea of Middle Corridor is a reliable land connection between Europe and Asia, strengthening supply chain resilience and reducing dependence on a limited number of transport corridors. And Germany has an important role to play here. German expertise in logistics, transport technologies, digital systems, and industrial infrastructure is internationally recognized. German investment and innovation can contribute to making the Middle Corridor even more efficient, sustainable, and competitive. This is not simply an Azerbaijani project. It's a strategic connectivity initiative linking Europe with the South Caucasus, Central Asia, and beyond, creating, I think, new opportunities for trade, investment, and economic cooperation across this entire region.
Ambassador, the report also highlighted the importance of lasting peace in South Caucasus. How significant is the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia for unlocking the region's economic potential and strengthening cooperation with Europe?
After almost 4 decades of conflict, we can now proudly state that peace has already been established in our region. This is the most peaceful time in the relations between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Azerbaijan has been already taking very concrete steps to consolidate this peace and normalization. Practical bilateral economic cooperation with Armenia has been launched. The new situation is already fundamentally transforming the entire region. Peace will create new opportunities for trade, transport, investment, and stronger regional cooperation. The reopening of transport links would strengthen connectivity between Europe, the South Caucasus, and Central Asia. At the same time, it will create new economic opportunities for all the countries in the region. For Germany and the European Union, a peaceful South Caucasus also means greater stability, more secure transport corridors, and improved access to Central Asian markets. This complements Europe's broader objectives of strengthening connectivity and economic resilience. Azerbaijan has consistently stated that it seeks a future based on mutual recognition of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and peaceful cooperation. We believe that dialogue, respect for international law, and existing political will help achieve a durable peace in our region. Ultimately, peace is not only about ending conflict, it's about creating opportunities for future generations, encouraging investment and strengthening regional cooperation, and building a more prosperous future for everyone. That's what is already happening in our region.
Ambassador, finally, if we were sitting here again 5 years from now, what would success in Germany-Azerbaijan relations look like? What concrete achievements would you hope both countries had accomplished by that time?
5 years from now, I hope we'll be able to say that Germany and Azerbaijan have built a truly comprehensive strategic partnership. I would like to see our political dialogue becoming even stronger, supported by regular exchanges between our governments, parliaments, businesses, universities, and more. Economically, I hope bilateral trade and investment will have grown significantly. I would like to see many more German companies participating in renewable energy, hydrogen, digital technologies, manufacturing, logistics and infrastructure projects in Azerbaijan. By the way, just in the energy security area, the cooperation is tremendous. Already 3 energy giants of Germany import natural gas from Azerbaijan amounting to 3.5 billion cubic meters of gas annually, and this is a significant contribution also to Germany's energy independence and energy security. But it's also going now beyond the energy area into renewables, into hydrogen, into other areas that I've just listed. We will, of course, continue contributing to Germany's and Europe's energy security. Of course, the energy security and the green transition should reinforce one another, and I believe Azerbaijan and Germany can become important partners in both areas. I also hope that the Middle Corridor will have become one of Eurasia's principal trade routes, supported by German technology, investment, and expertise. And finally, we hope we'll be able to speak about a peaceful, stable, and economically integrated South Caucasus that would create enormous opportunities for the entire region as well as for Europe. Perhaps I would say finally, the most importantly, I hope even more Germans will discover Azerbaijan, its rich culture, beautiful nature, hospitality, and more partnerships and friendships will be built between our two people. Because ultimately, the strongest relationship between two countries is one that's built not only by governments, but also by their people.
That was Nassimi Agaev, Azerbaijan's ambassador to Germany. Thank you for your time, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Now, in a recent Reuters interview, Assistant to the President of Azerbaijan, Hikmet Hajiev, clearly outlined Baku's position on the peace process with Armenia. Yet within hours, selective reporting of his remarks produced headlines that demonstrated how some media outlets can distort a clear diplomatic message through omission and selective framing.
Reporting becomes distortion the moment a single clause is isolated to subvert the meaning of an entire statement. This boundary was crossed following a recent Reuters interview with Hikmet Hajiev, assistant to the president of Azerbaijan, regarding the peace process with Armenia. While Hajiev noted that the two nations are experiencing real peace on the ground, he reiterated that a formal treaty requires the removal of territorial claims from Armenia's constitutional framework. He stated, "The form of constitutional changes is Armenia's internal matter. What is important for Azerbaijan is that the provisions we regard as territorial claims against our country are formally removed, whether through the adoption of a new constitution or another legal mechanism." Shortly afterwards, several media outlets isolated the phrase "another legal mechanism," while overlooking the crucial word "form." Stripped of that context, his remarks were recast to suggest, and in some cases imply outright, that Azerbaijan had dropped its constitutional requirement for signing the final peace agreement. Hajiev made clear that Azerbaijan's position on Armenia's constitution remains unchanged. Baku continues to object to the constitutional preamble's reference to a Soviet-era document calling for the reunification of Armenia and Karabakh, viewing it as a territorial claim against Azerbaijan. This shows how a procedural reference, stripped of its context, can be recast into a political claim that the original statement never made.
Now, Slovakia's President Peter Pellegrini has pledged stronger support for Azerbaijan within the European Union. He made the comment during a high-profile visit to Shusha, where he met President Ilham Aliyev and signed key agreements on energy and defense.
Shusha has played host to a strategic shift in relations. Slovak President Peter Pellegrini's high-profile talks with President Ilham Aliyev have solidified a new partnership, with joint defense initiatives already taking center stage.
We prefer in Slovakia to deal with each other as a partners. That means, for example, there is cooperation in defense industry. And we were very concrete today that our Minister of Defense is looking for a joint project, some new military equipment, which will be produced by both Slovaks and Azerbaijani companies, and which can after that enter new markets through Azerbaijan, and the benefit will go to both of us.
Bratislava is backing Garabag's rebuilding phase through smart village projects while securing alternative energy routes. In Brussels, Slovakia promises to protect Azerbaijan's strategic interests.
Slovakia has a style that we respect our partners. We don't comment. And so I think we will be, how to say it, maybe like an advocate of Azerbaijan among the European countries in a positive way. And of course, where some support is needed or some decision of the EU should be taken and it is somehow connected to Azerbaijan, of course you can count on us.
This mutual trust is expected to yield practical benefits for citizens of both nations. With direct flights between Baku and Bratislava launching this October, the strategic partnership is shifting from official agreements to direct physical connections.
Now, Kazakhstan and China have signed more than 70 agreements worth over $15 billion on President Tokayev's trip to Beijing. The deals look set to deepen cooperation in technology, transport, investment and industry. Fraser Kalamuziner has more from Almaty.
More than 70 commercial agreements valued at over $15 billion have been signed during Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's walking visit to China. The agreements cover technology, investment, transport and industrial cooperation. Speaking to executives from China's leading companies in Shanghai, Tokayev said Kazakhstan is entering what he described as a new golden 30 years of cooperation with China. Economic ties between the two countries continue to grow. Bilateral trade reached a record $49 billion last year, while Chinese investment in Kazakhstan has exceeded $30 billion. More than 8,500 companies with Chinese capital are now operating in the country. Tokayev said Kazakhstan is looking beyond attracting investment with a focus on joint technology development, research centers, advanced manufacturing and building a skilled workforce to support the knowledge-based economy. He also invited Chinese companies to take part in projects involving artificial intelligence, data centers, digital logistics and smart cities. Another focus is the digitalization of transport corridors linking China and Europe. Around 85% of rail freight between China and Europe pass through Kazakhstan, while the country has invested more than $35 billion in transport infrastructure. Tokayev said the next step is to speed up cross-border trade through digital technologies. One of the initiatives is the smart cargo platform designed to integrate customs, logistics and commercial services into a single digital system. Cooperation on critical minerals was also on the agenda. Kazakhstan says it wants to work with international partners not only on mining strategic minerals, but also on expanding domestic processing to create higher value-added industries. Tokayev's visit continues on July 17th with the World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai, where international cooperation on AI will be one of the main topics. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A-News.
Afghanistan, Iran and Tajikistan have agreed to establish a new trilateral road transport corridor. Under the new deal, commercial goods traveling between Iran and Tajikistan will be transported through Afghan territory. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Representatives from Afghanistan, Iran and Tajikistan say they have struck a deal to create a new road transport corridor between the three countries. Under the proposed corridor, shipments traveling between Iran and Tajikistan will cross Afghanistan, which lies between them, potentially giving a more important role in regional trade and transit. Their agreement follows talks in the Iranian city of Mashhad. A spokesperson for Afghanistan's transport ministry said all three countries committed to strengthening transport links and providing greater facilities for the movement and transit of goods. Afghan officials hope the corridor will reduce transport barriers, improve regional connectivity and create new opportunities for traders and transport companies. The three countries also agreed to create a working group to help facilitate visas for drivers, reduce border delays, and develop insurance arrangements for cross-border transport. The agreement is part of Afghanistan's wider effort to expand its position as a regional transit hub. In recent years, it has sought to establish new corridors and strengthen economic cooperation with its neighbors and countries in the region. Further technical discussions will be held before the corridor becomes fully operational. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now, as the countdown to the 2026 World Cup final gears up, New York and New Jersey are getting into the football spirit. The skies above Liberty State Park in New Jersey have been lit up by a spectacular drone show featuring the flags and crests of finalists Spain and Argentina, along with the tournament's official logo. The display came just hours after Argentina secured its place with a nail-biting 2-1 victory over England. Spain booked its spot a day earlier, beating France 2-0. The sides will now meet on Sunday at the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.